think it's safe to say China has had the single biggest build-out of infrastructure in the history of mankind. It's been spending more as a share of GDP at about 8.5% over the last 15 years, as well as in absolute numbers. It's hundreds of billions of dollars, making it the world's single largest market for infrastructure. And still, clearly, more to go. And that I think what we can say for China in terms of productivity of infrastructure, we've moved from the early 1900s maybe, which is pretty much where the country was back 25 years ago, to let's say somewhere in the 1950s to 1970s. So still another 40 or 50 years of infrastructure productivity to catch up. But I think the way I tend to measure the efficiency of a country's logistics and infrastructure is how many days does it take to get something from A to B, and how much does that cost? And right now, China is still woefully inefficient. I mean, relative to the North American continent, which would be the comparable, or even Europe, it still takes twice as long and costs twice as much to get something from point A to point B in China. So that's the opportunity to improve. We don't think that the spatial geography of the country is going to fundamentally change, and we're not going to see new cities of 10 or 20 million people popping up out of nowhere. What's going to happen is clusters. We will see the densification of clusters, agglomerations of anywhere between 10 and 50 million people, maybe even bigger in some areas, that become the hubs of China. So China is a continental economy. It looks closer to Europe than it does to North America, except with bigger hubs. And each of these hubs, as I said, will be about 50 million people, the size of a fair-sized European country. Much of the action will be inside those hubs, and they might be quite different. So I think the single biggest and most exciting piece of infrastructure I see is the metro build-out. And China's going to be spending, I can't remember the exact numbers, it's tens of billions of dollars though, for thousands of kilometers of metro lines. And arguably over 150 million people will live along these metro lines in about 35 cities over the next 10 years. And that's going to fundamentally change the shape of China. I think the build-out of the urban environment is the big story because it changes life. I mean, the city changes everything. When we wake up in the morning, we think differently when we're in the city than when we were in the countryside. We read differently, we process information, we save, we consume. All of this is different, and it's a one-way street. Even if people who have lived in the city go back to the countryside, they're still city people. They think differently. Their brains are different. That is reality, is that we have 1 billion people coming into Chinese cities. It's roughly about 650 million now, 51% urbanized, going up to about 65 or so, give or take. In fact, we can almost see the end game. It's not that far away. As I said, we don't think the spatial geography of the country is going to fundamentally change. The cities are the cities. It's just going to be a bit bigger and more clusters around them. So that's the reality, is that most of the change will be inside the city. It will be inside what's going on, the lives of people in those cities, the productivity that those cities can generate for the economy. That's going to be the critical factor in whether China, quote, makes it or not. And all things considered, it's on a pretty good trajectory. China's economic reform process has always been a matter of crossing the river by feeling the stones, and fact-based analysis. These are the phrases of the Communist Party, in fact, and started from the special economic zones. And so it's always been this idea that let's try it somewhere and see how it works, and then we'll replicate. So they copy. And as we see models that work, then they can replicate. In this case, now the government is saying, okay, we have to now not only be concerned about growth, but also about environmental impacts of growth. And the logic simply being that it costs a lot less to prevent a problem than to have to fix it later. So all that growth that you might have expected before, if you actually wind up having to remediate your water and so forth, then maybe that wasn't real growth. Maybe that was expensive. So that's the dynamic, and I think now we start to see low carbon as being a phrase. So we have 80-odd low carbon pilots going on around China, and cities that have been designated as low carbon eco cities, and 15 of those from the National Development and Reform Commission. So there's quite a lot of piloting going on. I think what's getting people up a little bit concerned is how do, again, we scale this? I mean, which of these technologies really becomes the one that makes the most difference to the most people? I actually think a lot of it is going to be back to the design of the city, and how do we capture many traditional Chinese values of harmony with nature and with integration of the society all around a common courtyard in a city. How do we get back to that? The competition now is about finding those technologies that can both increase productivity and be good for the environment and deliver a high quality of urban life to the citizenry.